We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they're controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government released.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is TopLobsta, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's guest, I would like to remind all of the live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we're going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. But fret not, because for a limited amount of time, we are offering you a free trial, 7 days for free. You can continue watching along, enjoying an ad-free viewing experience, and gaining access to the episode before the general public does. And if I could recommend anything, I would say get as much content as possible in those 7 days and then cancel your credit card before you have to pay us. That would be the real move.
Yeah, download all the stuff, distribute it illegally. It's a side hustle. Go ahead, do your thing.
It's a side hustle. Joining us today is, quite frankly, Frank, if you would, for the people who may not be familiar with your work, where can they find you and what is it that you focus on?
David, Top, thank you guys so much. Quite frankly.tv. I'm live weeknights at 7 p.m. This actually started my 19th year of doing all this in one form or another.
19 years.
I know it's crazy. February 18th, 2006. From it's crazy, but a lot of growth in that time. And I'll tell you something, man. What you guys talk about, it's a lot of current events. It's a lot of, going into the spooky. It's going into just, human interest, and it's a fun time. Long form talk format, call-ins, most nights, interesting guests, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having interest in me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. I mean, again, it's like whenever people with a bigger platform like this decide to waste their time talking to us, I'm sorry, videos playing in the background in my ears.
Wasting time. I just told you, I've been doing this for 19 years.
That's crazy, man. You don't find a lot of people in this field that have been doing it for 19 years. I mean, sometimes I've been podcasting for a long time, 7 years, quite unsuccessfully for 6 of them, and then suddenly things took off. And I feel like that's a little bit long in the tooth. But 19 years, I mean, how the hell what did you start talking about, Frank?
Oh man, we were when we were in college, we did it first in our college radio station, and we loved it so much that we brought it home by May of 2006. And you want to talk about, if you love this, you got to put your shoulder into it. There was no technology back then, so the Frankenstein operation that we had in our bedrooms, me, my brother Anthony, my buddy Mike, we're going to get together and actually do a 19th anniversary broadcast tomorrow night from the studio. But we were talking, celebrity bullshit and what's going on out there, movies, music, our lives, whatever. And as you said before, 6 out of your 7 years really did not bear much fruit. Well,
not at all.
First maybe 10 to 12 13 years of ours didn't bear much either, but you know what, you find yourself along the way, and as long as you're dialed into a passion, it doesn't matter. It takes you for a ride, and then you just, who the hell knows? And thankfully over that time, media completely reshaped itself, and that's also when the audience started becoming a little bit more interested in something that wasn't so lipstick and blush and high heels on the television every night produced. They're looking for something a little bit more raw and authentic, and something that they can interact with. The whole social aspect of media, for as bad as it can be, it also created opportunities for guys like us, and now there's really nothing stopping it, which is very heartwarming.
Yeah, man, I'm glad that there are guys like you that were taking the arrows, because I've been working peripherally with podcasts for probably 5, 6 years, doing artwork and little things like that behind the scenes. And then I decided one day, I'm like, you know what? These guys that I work for suck. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do it myself. And yeah, I've been lucky enough to pick the one thing that I like, and I was like, hey, other people seem to like this shit too. And here we are, episode 100 and whatever the fuck this will end up being. But again, thank you for being on. Sorry about before. I don't know what happened. My browser started playing shit, but
No, we didn't even
back.
hear that. We just heard you freaking out about the browser playing
Yeah, I'm
shit.
like,
We didn't
I was
hear
like,
any
oh,
video.
this is unprofessional. This guy's
I thought
here
you
for
were having a
19
stroke.
years.
I was like, this is going to be great content, dude. If Top has a stroke on a live feed, that's akin to Kanye, his mom for fame, right? We just have Top on stream and then ride his funeral to success. It would have been tremendous.
Another chapter in internet lore.
You know
That's
what? One of the podcasts that I did produce for had a guy have a stroke on it live. So I did see somebody have a stroke. It's fucking amazing, actually.
A planned thing? Like did they do almost like a nuclear test on the heart to like a stress test, or he just went down?
So he was being interviewed by my friend Reed Coverdale, and I did the artwork for Reed. So I would do thumbnails and his logos, all this stuff. But I'd watch the show too because I was interested. And the guy they're talking about like libertarian philosophy, and all of a sudden he looks up into like upper right hand corner of his room, like he sees like an angel or something. He's like,
Oh,
and then he just like stops and Reed's like, "You okay?" And the dude does like a backflip, and you just see his legs like from the bottom. It was the craziest shit ever, man.
did
I
he
know
reco-
that
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I know I'm not supposed to look into people's medical emergencies too, but I'm a conspiracy theorist at heart, so I can't help but look for the angle in virtually everything. It's a plague on my subconscious mind. But when I see people have a seizure, I can't help it. I look at them and I'm like, it looks like they see some shit. Like it looks like they see something and they're terrified of it. And there's like a bunch of videos that were going around after the lockdowns and they try to use proper language to not get booted off of YouTube within our first half hour. But there was a series of videos that came out after those lockdown times where people were, looking at something in their peripheral vision or, in the upper corner, and then all of a sudden they're following it. And then it kind of makes them do a twirl and then they fall down and they have a seizure. And I learned that is actually what a seizure looks like. I didn't know that previous to that. So being of limited information and limited critical thinking skills, I looked at that and I said, these people are seeing demons. It looks like they're seeing a demon and then they're stroking out. But
Well, the veil has had to have been lifted to something for a little bit there. When you think about, I mean, there's always those very strange categories of seizure or something like that. Just happened. That happened to Ron Paul like 4 years ago. Everybody's like, oh no, 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 no. And then it's like, everything's fine. So every once in a while, somebody just locks up in a media interview and they start slurring, and it's like it's this weird thing. But then we have these long, fabled, mysterious happenings like Al Roker, with the trigger word. You remember Al Roker? You remember you remember something that he just all of a sudden he got locked. People are, I forget what the trigger word was, people say, but you guys got to look up the old Al Roker freeze up where he just looks into the camera and he just stays frozen for the rest of the broadcast. It's so weird.
we see that a lot, right? Like Mitch McConnell has been doing that a lot lately. There's a lot of politicians that they're rolling out onto the world stage, and then suddenly they're having like some sort of an event, some sort of neurological event is taking place while they're at the podium. And it's happened so many times now that, especially with Biden, right? It's kind of a joke at this point. We don't react the way that I thought we would react if our world leaders were having, like, they were stroking out at the podium. We're just kind of like, oh, that's all right. And then we move on from it. And the most that you get from it is like a couple of memes. It's a strange thing, though. It keeps happening.
Yeah. Well, especially with Biden, we slipped into, that was a period of 4 years where from the get-go he was infirmed, and we were actually in this really terrible holding pattern where if you had to laugh or else you would really just start freaking out at the reality of the whole thing, which was there was a Praetorian guard of media and then lower rung zombie like NPC creatures that knew they were throwing up a protective front for a guy whose signature, regardless of what you think about the United States presidency, the signature of the president of the United States can do a lot of things. And the fact that they were throwing up a unified front of protection around a guy who was obviously being managed because he had no, control over his faculties for 4 years. They're in total, not denial, but they were just playing an op here. I mean, that's just nuts.
It's like
And
total damage control is what they
yeah,
found themselves in, but it wasn't even that they weren't even doing that much control, you know? I mean, you would get your articles where there would be like a flippant excuse for why this thing happened, and it was usually kind of, paper thin, you could knock it over with a little bit of scrutiny, but the world was happy to move on pretty quickly.
here's an example for you. But just talking about where we are right now, as far as everybody just taking this on and having it become normal. When Woodrow Wilson had his stroke, it was like an unspoken truth over the years that his wife was the one signing bills toward the end, that he was out of it, and he had people essentially grabbing his hand and scribbling on, Xing
Yeah.
on the line. That's something that we just, you hear about over the years. It almost becomes like bar trivia. The fact that everybody knew, oh yes, for the last 4 years, our president was barely physically and cognitively functional. We all knew that was just normal every day. We wake up in the morning. That's just the way it was. There was nothing hiding it. That's crazy, man.
It was a
That's
wild
crazy.
4 years.
It
I
was.
mean, we kinda just became okay with this. The meme became Weekend at Bernie's,
Yeah.
right? Or is that where they had the corpse in there? I mean, it was nonstop, but this isn't something that you just see in the presidency, right? It's like there are celebrities that have these meltdowns too. Katy Perry was one of those people that had like this meltdown on stage where all of a sudden her eye just started like flickering and she stopped talking and she froze up and she looked very
Well,
animatronic.
let's talk about this for a second. In the Bible, it says 365 times, fear not.
Mm,
This is like when angels or supernatural beings show up to, three-dimensional human beings. So they're seeing something and they're like, what am I looking at? Um, is it possible that these listen, they're as far as I'm concerned, they are in league with some of these entities. I think that they're like at the highest levels, they're probably summoning and worshiping these things. Well, you just mentioned Katy Perry and
mhm.
like Joe Biden or maybe even Mitch McConnell.
Wendy
Is-
Williams. You ever see that one? Wendy Williams has a full
Yeah.
blown meltdown, does a little two step, and then takes a spill and passes out.
Is it possible that these people are locking up in some form? I mean, is it possible that sleep paralysis and a stroke are similar events?
Ooh.
Because a sleep paralysis event would be like an alien type phenomena, which we're convinced that aliens are more of the Nephilim or maybe even of the fallen angel variety. Like, I don't think that they're from outer space. I think that they're interdimensional. I think they're from right here and they've been here for a long time. Some will call them demons. You will call them aliens now and something else later on. Is it possible that this is the same phenomenon and we're seeing this happen on like in 4K live
Mm.
TV right now?
Just to,
Because
can I bolster that real quick too before we pass that ball to Frank? When you mentioned that whole sleep paralysis aspect, when you have sleep paralysis, there is very much like an intense vibrational feeling, and your body locks up. And in fact, if that were to happen to you in waking life, it would resemble a stroke or a seizure.
and also, speaking of out of body experiences and things like that, that I'll be doing a little bit more of tonight. Sleep paralysis. It's crazy how much it is an integral part in the soul leaving the body. Like if people who actually practice traveling through astral planes, to actually be able to get that lift off, you have to induce sleep paralysis, move through it. And everybody I've interviewed on that, because I could never bring myself to do that. It talks about right at that point when you start getting that rising vibration, almost like the bed is shaking, and then
Mhm.
there is a separation. So it's interesting to think about what sleep paralysis means just from a functional standpoint. I always, people will say, "Hey, Frank," and I know this is not totally related to what you said, and I'll get to that in a second. But there's a lot of people who will say that when you talk about the sciences of the mind, especially the spirit and the soul, and whether or not you can be in, bilocate or be in two places, or what is a ghost, what is remote viewing, all this other
Mhm.
stuff. I often look, people will often out of pocket say, it's all demonic, it's all bullshit, and stay away from it. It's nothing but harm. And then but whereas I'm personally hesitant to do anything like that because it just freaks me out.
Yeah.
I don't essentially look at this as anything that is inherently demonic, because it would actually tell me that this is inherently part of the mechanics of our consciousness,
Yes.
and therefore we just don't understand it as much. But there are people who do understand it, and they have used it in very, very manipulative and malignant ways. And when it comes to what we see on television, as you're saying, these things flying around, I often wonder about that. I mean, the Wendy Williams thing, what I've learned is that it could, because all of a sudden she's out of it now. Now she's trapped in some conservatorship prison, almost like Britney Spears, which
Yeah.
gets me to the next thing. There's an alcoholism related dementia that goes along with the Wendy Williams thing. But then you also have people like Mitch McConnell and whatever, where it's also just degradation of old age. And
Mhm.
whether it is substances or old age, I think that when you are talking about those who are plugged into the hierarchy, even if it's just the visible hierarchy for us, because Congress, presidents, for the most part, that's middle management when you're
Mhm.
talking about the world order here. But MK Ultra, an actual breaking, fracturing, and then reprogramming of the mind. uh Often we talk about these things here too. Is this somebody ready to go in? And every time that Kanye West had flown off the deep end years ago, or someone like a Britney Spears, or any
Mhm.
other celebrity that's found running around Beverly Hills naked talking about they're coming to get me and all that shit, they usually haul off to a facility, and some handler, Harley Pasternak type, starts picking them up and piecing them back together, and they get a little bit of a tune up and all that shit. So how much of it is mind control that is fracturing apart? How much of it is old age? How much of it is substances? How much is rolling over each other? It's crazy. But those questions, I think, are questions are definitely warranted when you're talking about people who are so visible and part of either driving culture or policy. Because
Mhm.
as you guys know, there's plenty of people in our personal lives who are losing it too. So
Yeah.
I don't think they're all demonically possessed.
No, I would say what they probably have in common is trauma, right? So the MK Ultra program is a trauma-based program, and obviously you're not going to escape your real life, regardless of whether or not you're linked up with an intelligence agency that's running programs on you. People often, experience trauma, such as life, and so all the MK Ultra program really is them uh purposely inflicting trauma to get these results, whereas you could just go through something in your childhood that would make you potentially susceptible to this shit in adulthood. But
Yeah.
I agree with your ideas about, like, it does seem like there is a natural function of your own psychology that can produce this out of body remote viewing astral projection type of experience. And I have also heard, to your point, that you have to go through that vibrational stage. I think the vibrational stage being like the paralysis and this electrocution feeling. I think the problem isn't with the function of astral projection or remote viewing. The problem is twofold. Number one, you're going into a place we don't have a map for, and that
Mhm.
becomes very dangerous. And number two, this place is inhabited by some form of life, much like our physical realm is inhabited by some form of life. And I think that these things, they operate on rights and consent. And I think some of these entities will have rights to you, or you've consented in one way or another to them interacting with you. And what that results in is there are those who have sleep paralysis and it's not a harrowing experience. And there are those who figure out how to astral project out of it. Then there are those who have sleep paralysis and there are entities waiting in the corner of their room. And what
Man.
I fear is that if you are somebody who this entity has rights over, then when you leave your body, they will seek to inhabit it. And I don't think that that's everybody. I think some people haven't opened that doorway. Maybe it's a Christian thing. They're covered in the blood of Christ. They don't have this void that these things can enter. These things don't have rights over them. But some people do have that void, and some people do engage in something that might give an entity rights over them. So if you don't know what you're doing and you're leaving your body, you're going to a place with no map. Meanwhile, your body is empty and vulnerable, and there's this dark mass in the corner of your room. that is looming over you, or you hear this all the time. It's too big to fit in the room, so it's hunched over in the corner. It looks so tall, you can't tell how tall it is. It's hunched over. Or it's a man in a hat with a cloak that seems nefarious, and so I
Oh,
mean
check
that
this
I
out.
think is the real issue.
This is the book of Job, chapter 4, verse 13. He says, "In thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falleth on men, fear came upon me, and trembling, which made my bones to shake. Then a
Mhm.
spirit passed before my face; the hair of my flesh stood up."
Today's episode is brought to you by PurgeStore.com. What if I told you that more people have died from parasites than have ever died from war? What if I told you that diseases like cancer, multiple sclerosis, acne rosacea, and rheumatoid arthritis can all be treated with parasite medication? Rid your body of these all too common parasites by using Purge Parasite Cleanse. Purge Parasite Cleanse is made with ingredients like zinc, carrot powder, garlic, black walnut. These are all natural ingredients that keep you safe while killing the parasites. And while you're on PurgeStore.com, try out their Digestimes to promote healthy gut bacteria and aid in digestion. These, as well as any other products on PurgeStore.com, can be purchased with a promo code Nephilim, NEPHILIM, will save you 15% off of your entire purchase at PurgeStore.com.
This is actually the oldest book in the Bible, and he's describing a sleep paralysis experience. So I think you're right, Frank. It's not like an uncommon thing. This is part of the human condition, and we just don't really understand why it's happening. Or, well, some people do. Some people can do it at will, I guess. But most are just kind of,
Oh yeah, the most are just being dragged. My buddy George, and he's sound of mind. We were talking about this years ago. We all, a bunch of us guys got together. We went out to dinner one night, and everybody, you know how the table, especially when you got a lot of people together, everybody just starts breaking off into their own little side conversations. And he was telling me about this because at this time I was about to produce another show on this topic. He said, "Frank, did I ever tell you that this happens to me all the time?" I said, I said, "What do you mean? You leaving your body at night? This is something you practice?" He goes, "No, it's not practice. It's I shoot out of my body, and it's just like he's it's such a and the only way he can get it to stop was if he smoked at least a joint and a half before he went to bed every night. That's why he smoked so much. It just somehow kept him tethered to his body." And I brought this up with a couple of guests of mine who were, spoke on these topics, and they said that yeah, for some people, it is just something that it's been normal for them since they were 5 years old, where you're just all of a sudden you're shot. It feels like hundreds of miles up into the air. You're above the earth. You're going somewhere, whatever the hell's going on, and then before you know it, it's like it's almost like what is it? Those Tower of Terror rides where you just kind of just fall right back down in,
Yeah.
and there you are. And I can imagine how that is just oh man, I got to go to sleep again. I got to try to go to sleep, and how
Mhm.
exhausting that could be. I have friends. It's one thing to do the out of body stuff and to talk about the soul traveling, almost like a kite, where yeah, you're you're bound to this body over here, this mortal coil, but you're also just kind of freewheeling and all that, and moving up and through the dimensions, whatever the hell you like to say. But then there's lucid dreaming,
Mm.
which is something totally different. Where I have some friends who, without trying, are always lucid dreaming, and they hate it because they wake up the next morning and they're absolutely drained. I mean, you're not sleeping. Your mind is engaged in God knows, like, so you're trapped in a fantasy world, and you think that, oh wow, okay, I'll go to sleep and be a superhero for a couple of hours and then wake up, and then you wake up and you realize you've been living another life in another place, and maybe
You
that's
haven't
what we
rested.
always do. But again, there's that question about veils and compartmentalization, and where do we go when we sleep? And I don't know, what are we conscious of? What do we remember? Maybe that's just the whole thing, memory.
it's another good question to ask is the powers that be, um, do they want us going to these other places? Because it seems like it's a natural part of the human condition. At least most people who are like sentient being, not NPCs. I suppose NPCs would just go to bed, watch CNN, and wake up. Like there's a ton of people like that on SSRIs. I'm talking about the ones that do have these experiences, which is the vast majority. But now we have this huge push in America to basically, weed is legalized everywhere. And I'm not like, I'm not bashing weed or saying I'm a proponent of it. I smoke sometimes and it's like a tool that I use, but someone here in the comments says that they started smoking so that they can go to bed. And yeah, it's true. When you do smoke, when you're actively smoking, you're not going to have these dreams or at least not remember them. Maybe you're
Yeah.
not taking part in them or maybe it's masking them. And it gets my conspiracy brain thinking like, well, why is this proliferated in our culture so much? Like, do they not want us cognizant or traveling or I don't know.
Well, it's like if there is a way for us to tap into the spiritual realm, I believe that the reason that we're here is to pursue a work, right? We all have our mission, our hero's journey, something that was given to us, this innate driving force that we have within us, and we pursue that. That's the right track. But does that mean if there's a spiritual realm that there would be a right track there as well, something that we're meant to be doing? So I could see that you might want to increase this weed culture to the extent that the vast majority of people aren't partaking. But it's worth mentioning that, you talked about your friend is having this experience where he's blasting off, and he is tethered in some way, and I think that is oftentimes described as this silver cord,
Yeah.
that keeps you in your, to use your word, mortal coil. But when you the Egyptians believed that your soul had to, embark on a journey, and this journey was upward into space, whatever the nature of space is, and you had to navigate. There would be places that you went. You got to make a left at this constellation. You got to go to this and have that experience, and eventually you end up in a place where your soul or your heart is measured or weighed against a single feather. And in other words, it was like a way of measuring your, I guess, your sin, but in sort of Egyptian mythology. So, this thing is a massive part of our lives. But you just had Tucker Carlson recently talking about how here in the West, I think he was talking to Sean Ryan or something. He said here in the West, we've been stripped of our understanding of the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And he suspects that it was done nefariously, or I'm paraphrasing. I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I would agree with that. It seems that we've been purposely stripped of our understanding. So when you start to look at the things that in the West, we don't really talk about spirituality. The church in the West has become truncated and given you a watered down, reductive version of spirituality. And really it's something that we ridicule in America, if you start to really explore these things. So could you then imagine a scenario where maybe we have been purposely stripped of the map, our understanding of the spiritual realm?
Yeah.
And if some people just innately go there, you have to ask yourself two questions. One, is it because it's a natural function and we're supposed to go there? Maybe they have something to do. Or two, the way my mind goes is if people are having it happen to them against their will, I do believe that there's such thing as generational iniquity. I never used to believe that you would be tethered to the sins of your father or your ancestors in any real way, because why should you be? Until I started reading the Bible and I realized, oh, that's pretty explicitly stated that you will have generational iniquity based upon what your predecessors did. And what if your predecessors, my grandmother, for example, was clairvoyant. She engaged in remote viewing. She was very much like New Age kind of a character, plagued with alien abduction experiences. So I don't know what my grandmother did, but I know I have weird experiences. I know my mother has weird experiences. And I know that the Bible talks about generational iniquity. So maybe these people who are being removed from this realm and injected into the spiritual realm against their will do so by way of rights over them, not by way of free will.
Jeez, I've got so much. What the? Okay, where the fuck do we start? Okay, well, let's just start from the back to the front. It's interesting because when you talk about generational iniquity, I think about our DNA and essentially how this has been from the beginning logbook of everything that we have done. You want to talk, it's essentially like to open up DNA, I mean, apparently they just found the true Jack the Ripper all these
I
years
saw
later.
that. Don't they do that every once in a while? Don't they find the true Jack the Ripper once every couple of years?
They got the something off of the bloody sheet here, and they found a guy that was supposed, let's say, and I know that this is the truth, whether this is just some kind of propaganda or whatever. It if the DNA can be collected from something that is 500 years old, there is no doubt you're going to be able to find somebody who matches that all these years later. It's a logbook, and everybody from the beginning, and so along the way, talking about your a clairvoyant great grandmother or something like that. Perhaps that's some of her contributions to the family lineage on a genetic line. Who knows? I mean, is DNA, is our code not directly linked in some kind of a divine way to God? You have to imagine so, if it's the building block of all things, and it is in itself very intelligent, and it moves with us through the generations. So there's that. I also think there might be something worth exploring about the idea that whether you're picking up a psychic talent or whether you are picking up a guitar, there are some people who are just naturally gifted over those who really have to work at it. But it doesn't mean that you in your unnatural state, in your natural state, are not as good as the guy next to you who is just like a virtuoso. You can still put your mind to it and find your fingers on the fretboard and be able to do some chord progressions over a couple of months, and it can happen. So same thing with being able to meditate and get yourself to higher states of mind, or lower states of mind, whatever you're doing vibrationally there. So I consider the generational standpoint. I also consider the standpoint that, or the idea that some people might just be more innately talented than others. But it is part of being human, so we all have the same opportunities to work at it. That's what I would also think there too. Now, going back a little bit further, also to cannabis, something that I thought was really interesting. How are we with time? I know you guys got to bounce off.
No, I mean we're cooking, man. We're good.
Hey, let us know when when you got to go.
Oh, no. We'll just do the hour. I just wanted to be cognizant of what you guys. I know you guys do jump off time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you know what? We're kicking the pores out, guys. Join the Patreon. See you later.
Good call, man. 33-minute mark.
People are gonna hate me now.
Before you kick them out, I just want to explain real quick, guys. You can go over to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Continue watching along. Sign up for free and enjoy the rest of the episode. Otherwise, we will see you when the episode drops in its entirety elsewhere. All right, continue.
Okay. So, then it was cannabis. And I think back to all of my talks with who's now become a good friend of mine, Kathy O'Brien. And you guys know Kathy's work with Transformation of America. Did you ever read that book?
No, I've not read it. I can't read.
So Kathy is a recovered MK Ultra,
Yes.
and her daughter.
Yes.
And these books are incredible. And she she drops a dime on everybody. But either way, what in all the times that she and I had spoken over the years, the one thing she said that I thought was always very interesting is that out of all of the encouragement that she and other people in the program were given to go out and experiment with cocaine, any other kind of designer drug, whatever, the one thing that alcohol, the one thing that they always prohibited them from touching was cannabis.
Really?
That's what she said. That cannabis was the only thing that was off limits for MK Ultra, puppets. And I wondered about that. And I started thinking about it too, because whenever I do smoke, there's one thing that I do see a lot more of. I do analyze myself a lot more honestly.
It's true.
I see my fault in things a lot more clearly. I can, things that does happen. I mean, of course you can push it to the limit, and then of course you just smoke so much or you eat so much that you're just in the throes of a massive anxiety attack, and you think that your kidneys are shutting down, and you're not really getting anything out of it. But as far as just, for example, like everything that's going on right now with how a lot of alternative medical, people in alternative medicine and everything else have really opened up the books on serious studies on ketamine or psilocybin in micro doses. Like, what does it do to break depression and everything else in the way that, lifelong regimens of SSRIs never did. Um, I think that's pretty interesting. So when I think about that, and I think about, as you said before, when you're navigating through these astral planes, what are you prepared for? Are we ever the navigation process is the whole thing. When we're raised by our parents and our grandparents and all that, we are prepared to supposedly go into life and all the good and bad places life can take you. Actually, no, life just takes you to places and you have choices to make along the way. And you can have good and bad experiences. There are inherent dangers out there in the world. The same thing, what you're essentially saying is that leaving this material world and spending any time in another world, whether it be through sleep or meditative practices or whatever anything else like that, you're walking into another place that we have not had any preparation for. What's the reasoning behind that? I mean, your guess is as good as mine. Is it an inherently bad place? No, but
Yeah, I
it
don't
is
think so.
definitely filled with all of the same kind of dangers and opportunities for good growth experiences like we have in this world, but we never had anybody teaching us about it. We've just been told it's either all good or it's all bad, which is not the case about anything. You can't broad stroke anything like that. So the real question is, how do you guide yourself through? Jesus Christ is the wonderful way to keep his grace on your side and try to attach yourself. That's a wonderful protective measure there. Then you think about people more on the shamanic areas, people like Carlos Castaneda, who have talked about his time with the shamans down in Mexico, teaching people to prepare for the transition into the next life, to be able to avoid the grasp of like the great eagle that's going to eat your soul. How do you get around the eagle before it eats your soul? That whole concept that Earth is really a soul recycling trap.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to avoid it. So there's just so much. I mean, what you just said right there, we could talk for 5 hours.
So, I mean, you brought up MK Ultra. The shaman thing is a whole bag, right? It's I simply don't think we have enough time, but the MK Ultra thing is fascinating because we've been talking a lot, kind of tongue in cheek. It's like a joke, but it also is the truth. Um, Back in the day, the intelligence agencies used to run operations like Operation Midnight Climax, right? They're going to go to whorehouses, they're going to kidnap Johns, they're going to dose them with LSD, and they're going to, look at these things through the lens of experimentation. It used to be almost like a Clockwork Orange situation. They'd peel your eyeballs open, sit you down in a chair, they'd dose you with some sort of psychedelic, and they'd expose you to MK Ultra programming. What I fear lately is this idea that the industry has gotten a hold of marijuana, this compound that we're talking about that is cannabis, right? So many parts THC, so many parts CBD. The industry has driven through the roof the psychedelic aspect being the THC, and they've sacrificed the anti-anxiety, the relaxing component, the CBD, and they're creating like Frankenstrains that are incredibly anxiety inducing. And I would say it's because you're constantly on the edge of an actual trip when you're smoking really, really potent strains like that. So nowadays, instead of having to kidnap Johns, we have this culture that celebrates cannabis, and I partake from time to time, but I recognize that, like anything, it becomes to your detriment. There's a point of diminishing returns for sure. So now we're all on this sort of low psychedelic, anxiety inducing component because they've driven the THC through the wall. And we're also exposed to high levels of MK Ultra propaganda through Hollywood, right? So now you don't have to be strapped to it's I've been joking around calling us free range MK Ultra victims, right? We're
Yeah.
doing it to ourselves. We're going out of our own way to smoke it. We're going out of our own way to absorb the content. And it's happening from the comfort of our living room. And once you detach, you got this bad boy. It's constantly happening. So you're constantly looking at this little thing. It's telling you all this crazy shit. It's engineering your opinions, your ideas about the world. It's subliminally messaging you, and you're primed for it because you're on this low grade psychedelic.
It's the portal in your palm is like the way I like to call it. You know, it's a double-edged sword. I don't know which edge is sharper, but MK Ultra, as I say a lot on my own show, there's always testing in beta phases, but MK Ultra is standard operating procedure. It's a cultural underpinning. It underpins our entire culture at this point, especially when you go into how it was really morphed into the way that the media works through Mockingbird, and then the evolution of psyop programs into mind warp programs. The Michael Aquino stuff. That right there is all media based. It's all about, and then and like you said right there, the things like cannabis have in many ways become our own version of Soma. And you're right about the high, like whenever we call up our buddies, they're like, hey man, what kind of pre-rolls you have on you right now? I'm always like, okay, give me something light, low dose sativa. I want something airy. Give me a nice like Jack Herer, a Blue Dream, whatever, something light, so that I can go outside and have a workout or read a book or whatever. But the couch lock existential crisis shit, that is like everything. I don't know how everybody like fiends for like an existential crisis.
Yeah.
Every night before they go to bed. I don't know how they do it, but you're right.
I was telling David just the other, like maybe last week or something. I had bought, so a while ago, I had bought just a joint from this. It was like a food truck in somewhere, and they were selling. I'm a wild guy. No, they were selling like THC drinks, and it was cool. So I had a couple of those, and I saved them. And they had a joint too. I was like, "Is that real weed?" They're like, "Yeah, yeah." So I said, let me buy one of those, and I bought one, and I never smoked it because I looked at this thing, and it's covered in like crack crystals. I was like, "What the fuck? I've never seen this." I don't even want to open it and touch it because I don't know what's permeating through my skin, but I had it in my closet, and the other day I just decided to take it and just flush it down the toilet. I'm like, I want nothing to do with this thing. In case, like,
out of here.
Yeah, dude, what is this gonna, like? I'm gonna see the devil. I'm gonna smoke this and just go to another astral plane. I'm like, nah. We're not doing this right now.
Dude, when I was living in Vegas, I was there right when the industry like really popped off, and I got to go to my first dispensary out there. And you go in, you have this experience, everything is white and almost medical, and the staff is very professional. They have digital displays, all the different weeds you can get. It's got all the craziest names you could possibly imagine. I remember getting some shit that was named after Tupac. And I also bought those pre-rolls. And yeah, to your point, it's like when you look at it, they call them moon rocks, which, like, I don't want to fucking smoke anything that has rocks in the title. And then they're also putting wax, like dabs. So it's regular weed. Well, it's not fucking, no, let me take that back. Redacted. It's crazy psychotic super weed that scientists have concocted, mixed with some sort of distilled version into a wax. And then all of a sudden, just in case that wasn't enough, moon rock, something that is like basically the weed version of crack. And yeah, when I was in Vegas, I had, for the first and last time in my life, something that I was unable to identify for quite some time. In hindsight, I think it was a anxiety attack, like an actual anxiety attack. I lost function in my hands. I couldn't close them anymore. I couldn't regulate my breath and my heartbeat. My heart started racing. I couldn't, and I've been a drug enjoyer throughout my teenage years, and drug enjoyer, and I've done quite a bit in the way of like psychedelics and such. And I figured out through those experiences how to regulate my experience through breathing, and just kind of bringing things down, because it's all psychosomatic. So if it's happening in your head, you can control it, or so I thought. This was the first time we did. I mean, I'm talking like ecstasy and mushrooms and all kinds of shit when I was a kid, and all of a sudden, as an adult, weed sends me spiraling to the extent where I didn't want to tell my wife what was happening. I thought it was a cardiac event, and I simply decided to. I was like, I'm not gonna, because if you tell your wife that you're having a cardiac event, she's gonna panic. That's gonna make you feel worse. So I'm like, at least if I can do so relatively peacefully. And I went to sleep like that, not able to close my hands, couldn't plug my phone into the charger. It was just like I was dealing with wet noodles for hands, and that was all because of weed, dude.
Dude, listen, I know this is off topic, but not really. That is essentially the last time I ever had an edible. Somebody had given me, a friend of mine said, hey man, this is a really great chocolate bar. You should take a look at it. And so my daughter was born in September of 2020.
This episode is brought to you by Matt Rife and his team over at realrifetechnology.com, the home of the Real Rife machine. A Real Rife machine is an electromagnetic radio frequency device engineered by Dr. Royal Raymond Rife in the 1920s, used to address various health concerns. Unlike imitation devices on the market today, Rife Technology was co-founded by Dr. Rife's relatives and longtime friend of the show, Matthew Rife. Real Rife machines are the cutting edge in wellness technology. I personally own one, and I use it all the time. I like to tune my Real Rife machine to the frequencies that help with addiction, to help curb my sugar cravings. Their Royal Rife machine is recognized as a general wellness product by the FDA. They're great for weight optimization and fitness improvement, mental clarity and cognitive functions, sleep enhancement and mood balance, vitality and sexual functions, digestive health and immune boost, skin radiance and endurance boost, healthy blood pressure maintenance, and more. And while you're on realrifetechnologies.com, be sure to check out the other products they offer and use promo code Nephilim for 15% off your entire order. That's promo code Nephilim, Nephilim, for 15% off your entire order when you visit realrifetechnology.com.
This was like Mischief Night 2020. So it's October 30th, 2020. I'm in my living room. Everybody's sleeping. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to take a square of the whole bar, a square, and I'm going to nibble off a half of it and just wait a little while. What's going on there? I thought that's what I did. Apparently, though, it was like 100-gram bar instead of what I thought was like a 50-gram bar. And so what I had calculated was actually like double and 2.5 times what I thought. So over the course of 2.5 hours, I'm sitting there on the couch. And at this point, I'm sleeping on the couch because the first couple of months of my daughter being born, the only place that we can get her to go to sleep was in my bed, sleeping next to my wife. I said, you know what? She's sleeping. I'm taking the couch. I didn't get back into the bed, I think, until like Christmas Eve that year. But whatever. So probably for the best, because I'm on the couch. I didn't sleep a wink the entire night. And I'm asking myself, why the hell am I getting higher? Like, why is this getting worse? I should be on the other side of this already. And then I started doing the math. I realized that I ate too much. Like, oh shit. So you got to just get, but it's in everything. I know what you're talking about. And you know, you say, why do you have to go that far? Just roll a damn joint. But you got the joint, then it's dusted in the keef. And that's where you get all those crystals from the keef, because it's like the shake. And then they do the swirly, twirly oil wrap around the top with a cherry on top, whatever the hell they do. It's like, what? I mean, I understand that you're trying to like appeal to people's like, whoa, that's pretty. But it's just it's so much. And again, there's a difference between you take a drag of something, you sit back, you catch a summer breeze, you hear a fireworks show somewhere in the distance over there, and you're contemplating life, and you're just kind of going for a nice little flight. And that right there, I can see where if you have been subconsciously fractured and put back together and had things hidden inside of you, information, trigger words to get you to become some kind of a Manchurian candidate or whatever. I can see where stripping away the ego, relaxing the self, and allowing you to have a little bit more of self-reflective time can be a detriment to the programmers who have gotten you. And like we said before, everybody's got programmers, because MK Ultra is underpinning the culture. It's a standard operating procedure for the culture right now. So we're all dealing with this. So I don't care where people go for that self-reflection. You know, I get that from church, but every once in a while I will take a smoke, and there'll be that point where I just I don't know. There's a lot of different roads that can bring you to those places where you see things a lot differently than you do when you are in the rat race of whatever the hell your routine is. And but certainly the the specialty joints and the super weed are not bringing you there. They're bringing you to a psychedelic place, and it can get pretty confusing at times. And then again, maybe I'm just a lightweight.
Well, check
Well,
this
Frank,
out though. This
I
is
wanted to
from. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Top.
I wanted to ask you if you did any kind of deep dive into Catcher in the Rye, because the book, I'm sure you've read it as a kid. How old are
Yeah.
you? Like 30s?
I'm turning 40 in April.
Okay, so yeah, we're around the same age group, so we've all been subjected to this in high school or some form or another. And this book, we just had a guest on, William Ramsey Investigates, great guest. He broke down the book. It's written in 1951, but it's the precursor, like you said, the idea that we have laid the foundation of MK Ultra programming to our society. Well, this is kind of where it started. MK Ultra starts formally in 1943, but in 1951, Catcher in the Rye was written by I forget, J.D. Salinger,
Yeah.
and it has these ideas right off the top. Right when you came on, you said something about split brain, and I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, that's an idea in Catcher in the Rye. The Manchurian Candidate. There are three major tied directly to Catcher in the Rye. Actually, maybe four if you include this Luigi Mangione character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it seems like a programming that's happening, but it only affects certain traits, certain genetics, maybe. But when the time is ready, there must be some kind of trigger word, and boom, these guys go out, they do what they've got to do, and they're carrying a copy of The Catcher in the Rye. And they're actually, most of them reference back to it. They're like, listen, I don't care that John Lennon's dead. I just want everybody to read this book.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what the fuck are you talking about over here?
Well, if you look it up, MK Ultra, even Google will tell you this. The most vulnerable to that sort of programming are people that have dissociative identity disorders, and schizophrenia and bipolar are definitely identity disorders. If you read The Catcher in the Rye, this guy certainly is experiencing some sort of identity disorder, and this is worth bringing up here. This is actually a great way to tie this all together. This is from Medscape. I believe it's one of Canada's medical journals, but I scroll down a little bit here, and this entire article, I won't pick it apart, but there has been a surge, a notable surge in schizophrenia cases. Now, when we were younger, a lot of the narrative about the dangers of marijuana were that if you were somebody who had a proclivity for some sort of identity dissociative disorder like schizophrenia, that cannabis use could actually spur that on. And so basically, the defense used to be not the case. It's not weed's fault that you have a hereditary proclivity for schizophrenia. Those things, sure, maybe the weed can spur it on, but basically the defense was this thing would have happened to you anyway. And so weed may have been the catalyst, but there was an underlying issue the entire time. Whatever the case may be, I read something recently that said that we've seen a 27% increase in the amount of diagnosed schizophrenics in America. And I believe that schizophrenia is a spiritual disorder, not a brain chemical disorder, mainly because we've never had any evidence to support the idea that there's a chemical imbalance in the brain. Because in order to display that, you would have to kill a living person and do an autopsy on them and show us somehow. And you can't show us the chemical imbalance in a cadaver. That doesn't work. So if you look that up, it's never been established. And we have no baseline either. So if you have a chemical imbalance in your pool, you can go to a store and you can say, hey, check this out. Here's a sample. And they'll go, okay, well, this is what the pH baseline is supposed to be. And you can tell that yours is deviating from that quite a bit. Here's what you want to do to fix it. We don't have a baseline. So I think it's really interesting because we're talking about the idea of MK Ultra putting you on psychedelics and then, programming you one way or another. You're wearing a Montauk shirt, which I've noticed, and the Montauk Project infamously was supposedly inducing trauma on children or other subjects in order to have these sort of psychic breakthroughs. And Stranger Things plays off of that, where the main character 11, her trauma introduces her to psychic abilities that opens up a dimensional
That was the working
gateway.
title. That was the working title of the series at one point. I believe it was Montauk.
Yes, and they and I kind of think Stranger Things is a better name for the show anyway, because Montauk probably would have gone over a lot of heads. But so there's this connection, right? You have this spiritual disorder in schizophrenia. You have marijuana now acting as a low-grade psychedelic because of the industry. You have an uptick in schizophrenia, and you also have the MK Ultra program that's putting people on psychedelics and then exploring their psychic abilities. So all these things feel connected. It's a big incestual circle. We're just chasing around the snake, kind of eating its tail. But I can't help but look at all those connections and wonder if we're being pushed towards something. And I do think that at the end of the day, the spiritual realm is larger than the physical realm, and in some ways more important than the physical realm, because when you pass away, that's where you're no longer going to be in a physical realm like this. So the implications, I can't say I know what they are, but when you stand back and look at that picture, it becomes pretty concerning.
Yeah. I think about Art Bell's uh, series of interviews with Malachi Martin in the late 90s before he died, talking about possession in particular, and how in about 96, 97 or so, in one of those first interviews, he had made the comment, because Father Martin was doing most of his work out of Manhattan, and he said back in 97 that he had seen a 700% increase, at least, in spiritual possession just from where he was working. And it's not even just about the obsessed and the tormented, but also the perfectly possessed, as he would say, the people who have made willing and completely satisfied unions with dark forces. But when you talk about the unwilling, and it's another reason why I have, over the years, I've started to use the concept of the phone being a portal in our palm over the years, because when you think about other modes of possession, and what can they be? But the other thing there too is, if you are a person of great faith and you practice that faith, then you are going to be very well protected compared to the next person. And when you think about the state of the average person in society, we are really analyzing a culture that is being steamrolled and left void of any kind of real spiritual grounding, and all vessels will be filled with something.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when we were looking into, even, when Black Lives Matter started becoming more and more prevalent in the streets and everything else like that, we were learning about what's it, colors, whatever hell, Patrice Colors.
Hmm.
One of the founders, the black lesbian witches,
Yeah.
literal black lesbian witches. They
Yeah.
said, we are trained in not only Marxism, but this was witchcraft. That even the hashtags that they were using on these online, remember, they said that we are invoking the spirits of people who were gone. I mean, they were talking about how much of these rallies and much of their online activity were very spiritually charged invocation rites.
Mhm.
And when you think about how for generations now, American children have been more and more encouraged to leave behind the traditional religions of their parents and grandparents and great grandparents, and go into a more new age, spiritual but not religious, just open to anything kind of a thing, where you're, what are you really saying? I mean, you're talking about people who are showing up at rallies and chanting things and being a part and being a willing part of somebody else's religious practice, when they themselves think that they are in some way being neutral and generally beneficial for society, but they
Yes.
just really have no bearings.
Mhm.
So when you talk about the spirit world and the material world and how they're interacting with each other and how we're being groomed for one thing or another, and then you add all the other things on top of it, whether they be substance related, media related, it does present a very complex tapestry. And I, that's why I think it's best for people to start retreating a little bit deeper into their own private, their homes, take care of their family, and just try to reestablish things on an individual level, because This kind of seems like we're fighting the tide, something that's just so massive in size that has happened and built up around us over the course of years. We got to find some kind of a way to just protect ourselves while something comes to a head. I don't know what it is. Are we looking at a redux of the battle, the battle in the Great War in heaven from Genesis? Is that, are we going to get a redux of that at some point? What is it? The 3 days of darkness? Like, how are we going to be tested? Because obviously the play for who has control over this realm is really heating up. It's evident to me.
Well, what I would say to people, and I'll keep it short. It's like, look, we are moving towards this new age kind of situation, and people are becoming more receptive to the idea of spiritual realms, less receptive to the idea of Christianity, but more receptive to the idea of spiritual realms. And what I would say to that is, through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, we are given the authority through his name to tread on scorpions and serpents. And that means negative spiritual entities that are not in alignment with God the Father, the Creator, or Jesus Christ. You don't have an ability to defend yourself against these things. You don't have a map for the spiritual realm. We've been given one. If you can toss off the way that Western culture has mocked, ridiculed, and basically thrown out Christianity in so many ways, if you can get past the truncated version of the Bible and Christianity that some churches will give you, and you actually look at it with a scrutinizing eye and some critical thinking, you will see that in very many ways it is a wayfinder through these spiritual realms, and also a defense mechanism against these spiritual entities. So, you can get comfortable with the idea of spirituality, and maybe you can be a new age, this or that. But you got to check in with yourself. It's like, if you go into the forest or you go into the ocean, there are neutral things. There are good things. You might have a nice experience with a dolphin. You might have a neutral experience with a clownfish. You might have a negative experience with a shark. The spiritual realm is the same way. There are things that are there that, I guess, mean you no harm. There are things that may actually be positive entities, positive experiences, but there are things that are predatory. And you go into the water with a spear gun. You go into the woods with a shotgun to go hunting. You go into the spiritual realm totally unarmed. I don't think that's a good idea.
Wild
and there
way
is
to
a
be.
way.
Yeah, man, this has been a great conversation, Frank. I don't want to keep you any longer. You've been graceful with your time. Can you just tell the people one more time where they can find you, where they can support you, and we'll get you out of here, man. Thank you.
Well, first of all, anytime you guys want to do this again, you just let me know, and I'd love to have you guys join me sometime. Maybe we can do a Saturday night a Saturday night special on spooky issues or whatever the hell it is,
that'd be
or
great.
Friday night you guys can come by, whatever. We got to figure that out. But for those of you out there who want to look a little bit more into what I do, the best thing to do is just quitefrankly.tv. Quitefrankly.tv. You can watch the show there weeknights at 7:00. You can watch it on YouTube and Rumble and D Live and Pilled.net and all of the, and Twitter and whatever. But just in case of any further round of deplatforming that happens from time to time, it's always good for everybody to have a very stable URL that you control. So I would say, for all things related to the show, quitefrankly.tv, and I'll be live tonight at 7:00. And just thank you guys so much for taking interest in what I have to say on things, and I look forward to doing it again.
Dude, absolutely, man. This was a banger, and we need to make our own website. But until we do, don't forget to obey, submit, and comply. See you later, guys.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.